John McMullen joins us every day at this time. He's our 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles insider. He also covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. So we'll be glad to be joined by John now as the Eagles are preparing for their first road preseason game. They already had the game one at home, but now they have to go on the road for the preseason. And they got to go to Pittsburgh. Not an easy task. Steeltown, not an easy task with that crowd. State rivalry continues. John, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with the fact that the Eagles, they have traded for Dorial Green-Beckham. We talked about the news yesterday, but as over the last 24 hours, more and more information has come out. Josina Anderson is reporting that in the Eagles building, they felt that they really, really needed more help at the wide receiver position, while Jordan Matthews, whose teams played against DGB in college, he says that he's looking forward to having him on the team. So it seems like to me, John, that even though this is a pretty interesting situation with the Eagles wide receiver, really no one stepping up, it seems like everyone is in agreement that it's a good thing that he's here.
Oh, sure. From a talent perspective, it's a huge upgrade, and that's how you have to look at it first. And everybody saw what we all saw. Nobody knows it more than the people in that building. Without Jordan Matthews, the struggles of that entire wide receiver group last week in the opening preseason game, there was just no separation. Nobody can get open. And when they did, they dropped the football. And at some point, you have to be honest with yourself and say it's not going to improve. So the only way we're going to get better at that particular position was to go outside the organization, and that's what I think Howie Roseman did, and I think it was a prudent move. It's a gamble because of the off-the-field issues Dorial has had in the past, and even some of the on-field issues. If you talk to people in Tennessee, and I had a number of sources contact me yesterday about his attitude, about the fact that Mike Mularkey didn't like his work ethic, his conditioning. So you add that into the mix. But Howie was very honest about the fact that because of what they gave up to get Carson Wentz and all the draft picks that are going Cleveland's way, not only this year but next year and 2 years from now, they have to take some gambles to add talent to this team, and that's exactly what they did with DGB.
So one of the things you wrote over at 97.3 ESPN.com, John, was about the fact that the trade of Dennis Kelly opens the door now for a guy who, another offensive lineman I think a lot of Eagles fans are very aggravated with, and that's Andrew Gardner.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis Kelly was going to make this team if he wasn't moved as a backup offensive lineman. So obviously that opens up a position that wasn't going to be there before the trade. And Andrew Gardner is a guy who obviously did not play well against Tampa Bay. But he's, it's been a difficult situation for him. Remember, he was the starter at right guard last year before he got a Liz Frank injury in week 3. And all of a sudden, the new regime kicks him out to left tackle. So that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, to move from right guard to left tackle. And I actually talked to Andrew after the game. He's one of the stand-up guys. He knows he didn't play well against Tampa Bay, but he was still willing to talk about it. And it's a work in progress, and he thinks he can get better. The one thing he has, the check mark in his column, the biggest one, is his versatility, and he can play a number of different positions, and that's what you need to be a backup in this league. You got to have versatility. He took a pay cut, and as I wrote on 973ESPN.com, that's going to give him a better opportunity to make this team. Whether he does it or not, I think it'll the rest of the preseason will tell that tale, because he's obviously got to play better on the field. But now that Dennis Kelly's gone, he's back in the mix to be a backup on this team.
John, from your observations, who was the more versatile guy? Was it Gardner or was it Kelly?
I think Gardner is. Kelly is, because of his size, he's a 6'7" guy. He was really limited to playing tackle. And if you think about his athleticism, he can't really play left tackle, so he was really just a right tackle. And if you look at what the Eagles did once Lane Johnson, once it became clear that his suspension is going to be real, they didn't really count on Dennis Kelly. Instead they moved Alan Barber. So I think that says a lot. And to carry a guy as a backup, and really he can only play one position, that's tough to do. Now, the Eagles were going to do it. There's no question he was going to make this team. But I think the versatility that Gardner offers is more, and in a lot of ways could be more valuable.
John, also, considering the move with Dennis Kelly and now Gardner, according to the report from Field Yates, is taking a pay cut, what does this mean for the fifth-round pick, Vaitai? You know, we really haven't seen enough of him to really, I don't think, make a decision. I've only seen one game of him at the NFL level. Do we expect to see more of him as the preseason goes along, as the Eagles probably try to test to see what he can and can't do?
Yeah, I think you will, and I think it'll be similar to Isaac Seumalo getting the first opportunity to be the starter now at left guard. He hasn't really played that well to deserve that position, but the Eagles sort of want to throw him into the deep end of the pool and see what happens and see if his talent sort of comes to the surface. There's no question they would like Vaitai to make this team over Andrew Gardner because he is a draft choice. He is he's younger. He's under team control for less money, but he hasn't played well. And he hasn't gotten off the third team yet not only in the preseason, but the offseason, in all the OTAs and mini camps and things of that nature. So he's had a difficult time making the adjustment from the college level to the pro level, hardly the first guy. And it'll certainly make the practice squad if the Eagles are forced to cut him, because I don't think anybody else in the NFL is going to pick him up off waivers. So he's going to be around. The only question is, does he make the roster, or is he going to be on the practice squad? The Eagles would love to see him improve the last couple of weeks before the regular season, but we haven't seen many signs of that to this point.
Hey, John, how about the six-year player out of Penn State, Steven Wisniewski? What's his progress so far in camp?
Well, Wisniewski is rock solid, and he's one of the better interior backups this team has had in many years. And we just talked about the versatility with Andrew Gardner. That's what you have with Wisniewski. You can play center or either guard spot. He's been working at right guard when Brandon Brooks was injured. The Eagles were very happy with it. I think most people assumed he would move over to left guard and become the starter once they kicked Alan Barber over to right tackle. That hasn't developed yet. And I think the reason it hasn't is because the Eagles know what they have in Wisniewski, and they know what he can do, and they want to see what Seumalo can do. And if Seumalo does not excel or get a lot better in these final three preseason games, they'll just go to Wisniewski because they know what they have there.
The offensive line, obviously, with losing Lane Johnson is going to be pretty much up against it, but they got they're pretty big. They got some size for this offensive line. It's just that, and they're pretty athletic overall. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it projected to be, with Lane, one of the strengths of this team, especially if Jason Peters. A lot of it has to do if he's going to be on the field. And it's a concern because he's 34 years old, and he's now, all of these quad issues due to a nerve injury in his back are becoming chronic. So that's always a concern. But when Jason's out there, he's still one of the best left tackles in football. Jason Kelsey, they feel, is going to have a bounce-back season. And Lane was one of the best 5 right tackles in football. So those 3 positions alone, then you add Brandon Brooks to it, who is the big money free agent signing and certainly is an upgrade on what they had last season. All of a sudden, it looks like a pretty good offensive line. And then the Lane Johnson news happens. And that creates so many issues because you have to move Alan Barber, and you're really decreasing at 2 different positions. So it's going to be more difficult But I don't think it's going to be quite as bad as people expect once they center and really focus in on how they're going to move forward with the starting lineup. And eventually, I think it's going to be Barber at right tackle, and it's going to be Wisniewski, as I said, at left guard. I don't think Sayamala is going to win that job. I just don't think he's ready yet.
We're talking with John McMullen, our Eagles insider. And, John, offensive linemen, they like the run block. And I'm getting the sense that Peterson is going to be doing a lot more running than Chip Kelly. How do the guys feel about that? Have you had an opportunity to talk to some of the offensive linemen about running the ball more this year?
Well, I don't think it's going to be more. I just think it's going to be different. And one of the misconceptions about Chip Kelly was that because he ran up-tempo spread offense, he was a pass-first guy. He was really a run-first. He was the complete run-first coach, but it was inside and outside zone, and that's more of a finesse-type blocking style, where Doug's going to go to more traditional running games, traps, misdirection, draw plays, things like that. And offensive linemen like that because they get to go downhill. So I think, certainly from Jason Peters' perspective, he's thrilled to be in this system. I think Lane was before the suspension. He was very, very excited to get away from the up-tempo aspect of it. And Brooks is just, that guy's a monster, about 360 pounds. So
pushing people right out of the way.
Yeah. So, I mean, and if anything, if you think about Andy Reid was pass first coach, and that's who Doug has learned under. So I don't know if they're going to be more run-oriented. In fact, I think they're going to be less than what Chip did. But the offensive linemen like it better because of the style of running they're going to do.
Well, I guess you straightened me out. What I meant to say is they're going to be more of a, like you said that last year they were more outside. This year they're more between the tackles. They're going to get more chance to block downhill. Hey, John, any chance that Lane Johnson comes out of this with less than 10 games?
Very unlikely because different than the personal conduct policy, the PED and the substance abuse policy, those penalties are far more structured, and there's really no nuance to them. So he's at the point where it's 10 games, and it's very unlikely that it's going to be negotiated down. You never say never in this league because they often move the goalpost, and
they have, John, they have, because the substance that he was suspended for last is now not even banned.
Yeah, well, they changed the policy, but that was collectively bargained. So that part of it isn't the NFL changing the goalpost. It was the NFL and the NFLPA got together and they redid the PED policy, which is one of the main reasons why the penalties are different also. So, for instance, the next one, if Lane gets suspended again, it's a 2-year ban. So it's much stricter from that standpoint. And the penalties, as I said, they're pretty clear-cut in that aspect of policy, where you have sort of the ability to argue and be more malleable as the personal conduct policy.
John McMullen, our Eagles insider over at 973ESPN.com. You can follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. John, looking ahead to the preseason game tomorrow night, what are some of the things that you're looking for from the Eagles in that game?
Well, I think the first thing is what we addressed, the offensive line. You want to see how well Alan Barber is making the move from left guard to right tackle. You want to pay a lot of attention to Isaac Sayamalo. Because he has not been good to this point, and as I said, they're kind of throwing him into the pool, so to speak, the deep end, and they want to see if he can get better and get better quickly. And then I think you look at the wide receivers. Beckham's not going to play. He's going to travel. He's going to be there to sort of meet his new teammates, but one of the things you've seen going around is Nelson Aguilar saying he didn't think this was a message to the receiving group. Well, he better get the message because it is. And those guys better start playing better or they're all in danger of getting cut. Even Aguilar himself, he's been that bad. It's very unlikely that you're going to move on from a first-round pick in the second season. But the Josh Huffs of the world, the Reuben Randalls, it was a message to every single one of them, and they got to start improving.
Hey, John, these guys are all, I mean, let's face it, Jordan Matthews was, I brought this up earlier to Josh, Jordan Matthews, SEC Player of the Year, Receiver of the Year, and, of course, Aguilar with USC. What, these guys get to the Eagles, they can't catch? What's going on?
Well, it's a big difference. As good as the SEC is, as good as USC is, there's a big difference between that level and this level. And the main issue is the cornerbacks in this league can all play. So it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, but John, these guys are dropping balls that there's no one around. I mean, these guys are getting hit right in the hands, and there's nobody really challenging them for the balls that they're dropping. It's not like, they have to make a miraculous catch with somebody in their face. These guys are dropping balls that are right in their hands, and there's nobody around them.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the drop goes, it tends to be a mental thing. And really, Matthews had that kind of rep coming out. That's one of the reasons he was a second-round pick, and he doesn't have the greatest speed in the world. But he was a little inconsistent catching the football. And that is kind of borne out at the pro level. Aguilar never had that reputation. So for him, it's a little strange. And I think it's really the fact that he struggled so much, and it starts to get you, and you get the yips like in every sport. You see basketball players can't make a free throw. You remember Steve Sachs couldn't throw the ball to first base in baseball. All
Chuck
of a sudden
Knobloch.
you start getting the yips. And I think that's part of what's going on with Nelson. And then you have guys like Reuben Randall, and the knock on him, talented guy, but he's just laissez-faire about everything. And that, when you don't pay attention to detail and you don't do the little things, all of a sudden the drops start adding up.
John, I want to transition over to the NFL as a whole. It's taken me a couple of days to wrap my head around this whole situation with the NFL telling Clay Matthews, Julius Peppers, James Harrison, and Mike Neal, you have to meet with us by this date or we're suspending you. It seems a little bizarre that they set such an ultimatum because Al Jazeera America doesn't even exist anymore. The guy who's the source has recanted everything he said. Is there something that we don't know about going on here, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been, and I understand why people don't want to get into the gory details because it's not the most exciting thing in the world. But it's not like the NFL woke up today and said, we're going to suspend these guys. They've tried to talk to them 7 different times, and all the players have been hiding behind the NFLPA, which has told them not to cooperate, and that's where we stand. So it's not like the league all of a sudden just said, we're going to do this, and they're being completely unfair. They gave these players plenty of opportunities. And one of the things with the NFLPA, they've kind of leaned on the fact that it's an Al Jazeera report. And obviously, if you look at the political environment in our country, a Middle Eastern news outfit that's got a logo that people, for lack of a better term, are afraid of, there's not a lot of credibility from that news organization in this country. So I think from the NFLPA's perspective, they've leaned on that and said, hey, because it's Al Jazeera, you shouldn't take it seriously. But I'll remind people, the Washington Post ran with this story, and they developed their own evidence. So there is some smoke to the fire, whether people want to believe that or not. And one of the things that frustrates me from covering this league is the fact that so many people think the NFL wants to suspend star players. That's the last thing they want to do. I think if you look at what happened with Peyton Manning, he obviously is now retired, so he's not under the auspices of the NFLPA. He cooperated, and they just rubber stamped it, said, you're fine. If these players would have done the same thing would have happened. So I'm really struggling to understand the NFLPA strategy here. And all of a sudden, it turns from similar to Deflategate, which was about deflated football at first and then originally turned into does Roger Goodell have the power to suspend him? All of a sudden, this turns from PEDs to Roger Goodell suspending him for detrimental conduct to the league. So it's morphed into something, and I really think this is the NFLPA's fault, not the league's.
Maybe it gives a little validity to Lane Johnson saying that the NFLPA is not doing their job. I mean, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, obviously, but...
Yeah, well, it's different circumstance. In this case, I think the NFLPA is trying to do their best for the players. They think they're doing their best for the players. I think they've developed a bad strategy, not on purpose, but I think they're hurting the players from the strategy that they developed, because I don't think the NFL has any interest in suspending any of these players. But what they have to go is sort of go through the public relations hoops and show the general public we're doing our due diligence and saying these guys are clean. And as I said, if they just went through the interviews, they would have already gotten a rubber stamp like Peyton Manning did, and they'd already be cleared. So this is one I don't understand why the players are being so hard-headed.
Yeah, but John, just because somebody accuses you or makes an accusation like Al Jazeera did against these guys doesn't require them to be the league to talk to them. I don't understand why they even have to, why the NFL even would want to talk to them. They have their own testing procedures and policies that are in place. Obviously, Lane Johnson knows that, and so when like you said, when a news organization like Al Jazeera comes in and makes accusations, there's not that much credibility to it. Why would the NFL even pursue it? I don't get it.
Well, that again, and that's what the NFLPA has hoped to sort of snow the public on by using Al Jazeera. And that's why I brought up the Washington Post, who did their own investigation and came up with concrete evidence. So there is other evidence out there in this particular case. And the NFLPA's argument that the NFL doesn't have any credible evidence, which is possible, there's no question about it, but the fact that you need credible evidence to have an investigation, that's why you investigate, to get evidence. You don't do it beforehand. You don't have evidence before you investigate. So that's kind of a red herring. And if you bring that to any district attorney, he'll laugh at you. I mean, that's just the way investigations go. That's how you gather evidence, by investigating charges. And the league, and let's be honest, if we want to be completely honest, PED whispers have followed James Harrison and Clay Matthews specifically long before Al Jazeera.
This is true.
So it's a little disingenuous from the players' side.
Speaking of disingenuous, and maybe this is me just being a cranky pants, John, but I have to ask you about this. So Jerry Jones is one of the guys who was picked by the committee that Peter King is on for possibly be considered for enshrinement in the Hall of Fame. And I want to know, why on earth was he picked over Pat Bowlen?
Well, it depends what your standards are, and that's one of the issues, because they're not really clear-cut. From a business perspective, there's no question Jerry Jones is a Hall of Fame contributor. From a football perspective, there's no question he isn't. So it depends what your definition is. And I think the people that are making these decisions should make it very clear on why they are choosing the people they are choosing. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But clearly, when you're going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, more people weighted towards the football side. And as I said, Jerry, there's no question from a business standpoint, Jerry Jones deserves to be there, and what he's done for this league and the growth of this league. But from a football perspective, I certainly understand why people shake their head, because there's about 100 owners that should be in there before him.
And my final question on this, and again, I'm just doing a sanity check here, John. One of my arguments is that I don't give Jerry Jones the credit for those Super Bowls. I give Jimmy Johnson the credit for those rings and those trophies down in Dallas.
Well, you should, and it's one of the reasons why Jimmy is obviously they had a divorce, and people didn't like the fact that Jerry Jones gave Jimmy Johnson all the credit, But I mean, anyone who was following the league at that point, anyone who understands what was going on, those were Jimmy Johnson built teams, and it hasn't been the same in Dallas since he left, and there's a reason for that. And Jerry Jones has not been very good as a general manager, and I've advocated for years that Stephen Jones, his son, basically every good decision that comes from Dallas these days comes from Stephen, and every bad decision comes from Jerry. So from a football standpoint, yeah, he belongs nowhere near Canton. So I think the Hall of Fame should be far clearer in saying why these people are being nominated for the Hall of Fame. And usually for the contributor committee, that's just the rubber stamp you're going to go in. And they should say because of what he's done for this league and the growth of this league, not as a general manager.
We were talking about John McMullen. You can follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. He's our 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles insider, and he covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. John, talk to you tomorrow.
See you, John.
Hey, thank you, guys.